So let's begin with classical and operant conditioning. When I say the word salt, what do you think of? Pepper. Okay. Is that a conditioned response? It is not a conditioned response in the context of classical conditioning. But yet, two things are connected, right? So it's a type of associative learning. And all that associative learning means is connecting two or more things together, usually in time or space. For example, my graduate advisor at Ohio State conducted a study with some colleagues where they used a hydranencephalic infant who didn't have cerebral hemispheres, but had just the very basic brain structures. And they paired two stimuli together, a tone followed by a light about a second and a half later. Okay? They repeatedly paired these things two together. They monitored heart rate and found that if you presented just the tone without the light, that the infant seemed to expect, as noted by a change in heart rate, that another stimulus would be following. Well, that is not a classical conditioning. It is a type of associative learning, but classical conditioning is limited to when you're pairing two stimuli together, one of which, okay, at least with basic classical conditioning, must be an unconditioned stimulus. So, if you think of all the, and that has to be that has to produce an unconditioned reflex in the organism. And so you're limited to really just a handful of behaviors, okay? Unless you start talking about emotional conditioning, which I'm not going to do, but we're talking about things like blinking, salivating, and if you get into emotion, maybe fear. But these are very simple behaviors, okay? And classical conditioning then must be limited to the involvement of one of those stimuli being an unconditioned stimulus. Operant conditioning is when you connect a response to a subsequent stimulus, which is either reinforcing or punishing. And then you have the other type of associative learning, which I've described, maybe salt and pepper, or maybe a country song by Jody Messina. When I think about rain, I think about, help me out here, singing. Okay, when I think about singing, it's maybe don't listen to country here. Heavenly tune, and when I think about heaven, I think about angels, and when I think about angels, I think about you. Okay, isn't that cute, right? Okay. But you know what you get when you play country music backwards, though, right? Okay. Well, you get sober, you get, your dog comes home, you're married again, and your truck works, right? All right. So don't confuse classical conditioning with other types of associative learning. If we had our audience polling, I would create teams based on what you call that carbonated beverage, okay, depending on what part of the country you come from. And apparently, they've created a map of that. And mostly in the north, they call it pop. In the south, they call everything a Coke and a soda, kind of on the coast. And I don't know, whatever you call it here. What do they call it here? Soda. Call it a soda. All right. So that would be our teams for the day. Okay. All right. So the principle of instruction is the same, which is give students the opportunity to reflect upon what they're learning and to discuss it with other students. So each of you are, fortunately, teamed up at a desk with another person. And I want you to think of your answer first, and then I want you to share your answer with the partner next to you. And then I'm going to ask the class as a whole to respond by show of hands. So you get to indicate not only if you think that statement is true or false, but your confidence in your answer. Okay? So come up with an answer on your own, then provide reasoning for your answer to your partner, and then I'll poll the class. Okay, let's poll the class. Okay. After your discussion now, how many of you think that this statement is true? Okay, how many of you think it's false? And how many of you just don't know? Okay, all right, that's good. The correct answer is false. Okay, but why do some of us think that it is an unconditioned stimulus for salivation? And I see students repeatedly, get this question wrong. And the reason is, well, let me start, maybe give you a little hint here. A good test for an unconditioned stimulus is, would a baby reflexively respond to it? Right? Because if it's innate, you would expect that an infant who hasn't had all of these experiences yet would respond or not, by asking that question. Would a baby respond to it? So if you showed a baby a juicy hot dog, would the baby salivate? No. So is it likely to be an unconditioned stimulus? No. So then why do we salivate when we see juicy hot dogs? Because conditioning has occurred in which we have seen a juicy hot dog, then we've actually put it in our mouth, which is the trigger for salivation. And so through that basic association, the sight of a juicy hot dog has become a conditioned stimulus. You have to it will be true for animals too. So if you show an animal any type of food as an infant, it's not going to be salivating to it. So both humans and animals learn to salivate at the sight of food and the smell through learning. So it is an example of classical conditioning, but the sight of the food is a conditioned stimulus. So I want to emphasize just not everything's, just very limited set of stimuli that produce reflexes, and a good test for that is would it work in an infant. Did you have a question?
So I can just hear one of my kids saying, well then how come Pavlov's experiment is a true classical conditioning experiment if the food is paired with the tone and they had to learn at some point that that food's not a true unconditioned.
Well, they actually gave the food to the dog. So that the food itself, putting the food in the mouth would have been the unconditioned stimulus. In that original footage video, hopefully you've seen it, it shows that the dog also salivated just at the sight of the food, which indicates it's a conditioned stimulus. All right, so we got that one straight? We okay with that? All right. So all I want to say about classical conditioning is that not everything is classical conditioning. You don't turn on the radio because of a conditioned response, or you don't comb your hair that certain way because of a conditioned response. It's limited strictly to those innate reflexes. Secondly, many examples of basic classical conditioning are not basic classical conditioning. In fact, how many of you have seen examples of classical conditioning where you play a song of the soundtrack from Jaws, and everybody gets scared? That actually is not basic classical conditioning. It might be some higher order conditioning, which I'm not going to describe, or it might be vicarious, emotional classical conditioning, but it's not just straight basic classical conditioning. And if you want to talk about that later, we can, but I've got a lot more I want to tell you today. And once again, ask yourself, how will a baby react? That's a good test for if something is an unconditioned stimulus or not. All right, questions about classical conditioning? Yes?
One of the examples that I've seen is fish swimming to the top of the tank when you feed them. And I'm confused as to whether that's really classical conditioning or not.
That's a great question. Probably not. It gets a little more complicated when there are situations where you can have both classical conditioning and operant conditioning. And what many people think of as a conditioned response, for example, when you say the word sit and your dog sits, is that a conditioned response? It's not, Many stimuli set the context for when a behavior should occur, And when I say the word sit to a dog, that tells the dog, now's the time that I perform this behavior, and as a consequence, I'll likely be reinforced. I'll get a treat. Well, that's an operant behavior, the behavior of sitting being reinforced. However, if you say the word sit close enough in time to when you give the dog the treat, now you probably have some classical conditioning going on as well, where the word sit can produce a conditioned response of salivation. But those are two different behaviors. Salivating and sitting are two different behaviors. And they're better explained, one by classical conditioning and the other by operant conditioning. So the fish swimming to the surface, they see the fish food. That indicates now you should swim to the surface and you'll be reinforced. Okay? That's probably a great example of a discriminative stimulus in the context of operant conditioning. Yes?
I don't want to belabor this, but I know a lot of people use the office Altoid, and there's always a lot of debate as to whether
That's a very,
blend.
a very similar example. Okay, the ding on the computer. Give them now. Okay, now if I reach out, I'll get the food. Okay, but there's probably both occurring at the same time, and so that's it's very hard to find really great examples of just very, very true basic classical conditioning.
I've been using getting shocked by the doorknob in the winter since we live in a very dry area
Okay.
in northern New York, and avoiding the doorknobs because you've gotten shocked.
That would be a case of emotional conditioning, a fear, and you see the stimulus is paired with something painful, and now you avoid the stimulus.
So still not basic classical.
No, yeah, that would work for classical conditioning in the context of emotion. Yes, that would be okay. I can clarify others later. Okay. What about operant conditioning? In fact, the example that we just talked about with the fish swimming to the surface or the dog sitting are great examples of how many stimuli just set the context for when a behavior should occur. And those are the antecedents to the behavior, the stimuli that precede when the behavior occurs. For example, if it starts raining, that is the antecedent, okay, the rain, that's a stimulus that says now's a good time to put your umbrella up. And the behavior of putting up your umbrella then results in some consequence, which in this case, you stay dry or you get out of the rain. Okay? So the ABCs of behavior science are the antecedents, set the context, then the behavior occurs, and then the consequence, which is either going to be reinforcing or punishing, okay, or neither. So I want you to discuss briefly with a partner, true or false, shock is reinforcing. True, false, or it depends. Okay, anybody want to venture what the answer is? Yeah, in the back, please. And why did you say that? Okay. Okay, so you're saying there's a possibility of being either one? Yes.
I say it depends. I think about somebody electric chair in prison.
Yeah, okay, that sounds punishing, ultimately punishing. Yes.
There was a study I haven't found. It was recently done, and it was featured on NPR about a study that they did for people between the ages of 18 and 25 because of their connection to this. And they took cell phones away and they sent them into a room and they had to last 15 minutes. And the only thing that was available was an electric shock. And some of the guys kept pressing it because it was better than being bored.
Interesting. Okay. So, shock themselves. The correct answer is, it does depend. And the reason is I didn't give you enough information to tell you how it affected the behavior. Okay. If it strengthened a behavior, well, that's reinforcement. Even if it's shock, it doesn't matter. Okay. If it weakens a behavior, then it could be punishment. So, how many of you struggle to help your students understand the difference between positive and negative reinforcement and punishment? Okay. It happens every time I get a new class. Okay. So I have to start with telling them to forget everything that they know about positive and negative. Okay? Just forget it, okay? Except for one thing. Positive is there's a plus, okay? And that actually, like, you're adding something, and negative is indicated by a minus, which means subtraction. And that's all it means. Nothing more, nothing less. So let's walk through positive and negative reinforcement. So we know that it's reinforcement because what's the outcome on the behavior?
Increase.
It strengthens the behavior. It could be indicated by an increase in the frequency of a behavior or some other measure of learning that strengthens the behavior. So I want to emphasize two things. First, you start with the behavior. Now, when I introduced operant conditioning, I said there were antecedents, those stimuli that kind of set the context for the behavior. You have to separate those or ignore those in terms of this part right here, whether or not it's positive or negative. Okay? We're talking about what happens after the behavior, not before the behavior. It's what happens after the behavior. So one of the keys is to identify in any example of operant conditioning, what's the behavior and what's its immediate consequence. Okay? So first the behavior or response occurs, then the consequence, and in this case, positive just means that as a consequence of that behavior, something was added. It doesn't mean it was good or bad, it just means something was added, period. And we know that it's reinforcement because it's going to strengthen a behavior. So you have to look at the outcome. What happens to that behavior in the future? Okay. So a few examples. Okay. When you train a dog, if it repeats the behavior, shaking hands, rolling over, standing on its hind feet, if that behavior is strengthened because you gave it a treat immediately after the behavior, that's positive reinforcement. Because what was added? The treat. Okay. If you laugh at my jokes after I tell the joke, the consequence is you laugh. That's positive because it strengthens the behavior of me telling a joke. How could smoking, be positive reinforcement?
Take stress away. No, that's negative.
Okay. Give me another example.
But, rush of endorphin.
Okay, you get some, nicotine buzz or high that reinforces the behavior. Okay. Now, if you think, oh, it's because you're adding nicotine or you're adding a cigarette, that's wrong. Okay. The behavior is smoking. What's its consequence? Okay. It's the reinforcing high that they get. In fact, smoking could be, actually, there's multiple consequences of smoking. Yes, there is positive reinforcement because you get the high. There's also negative reinforcement because it takes away stress. There's also positive punishment, because you get things that should make you smoke less, like lung cancer. And there's also negative punishment because when you smoke, then you might lose friends or your ability to go into a restaurant or something. So there are multiple consequences of smoking. But if you're thinking that positive has to be good, I like to use smoking as an example because it doesn't mean good, have to do anything with good. Okay? And then finally, if you run a race and you win a trophy, the addition of the trophy after the behavior of running the race is positive reinforcement. Okay? Everybody clear on positive reinforcement?
So in this case, smoking is still behavior.
Yes.
And then we would have students identify what could be some positive reinforcements that keep
Yes.
people smoking.
Yes. In fact, one of my essay questions is come up with all 4 contingencies for smoking: positive and negative reinforcement and punishment. Okay. So negative reinforcement means nothing more than after the behavior, something was removed, subtracted, or taken away, or avoided. You have to throw that one in there too. Okay. Avoidance behavior is negative reinforcement. But once again, it strengthens the behavior. So if that consequence results in it occurring more frequently, it's reinforcement. And if the consequence was that something was taken away, then it's negative. So let me give you some examples of negative reinforcement. All right, if you live in an apartment and your neighbors are being noisy and you pound on the wall and they quiet down, how is that negative reinforcement? Because the pounding, removes the noise. Now, you don't get stuck into thinking that, well, pounding, you're adding pounding. What's wrong with that thinking? That's we're talking about the behavior and its consequence, okay? We're not talking about the behavior, what the behavior itself is. It's just we're talking about what the consequence is. So focus on the consequence. Likewise, when you say, well, taking an aspirin to get rid of a headache. Well, they're taking the aspirin. That must be positive, right? No, okay? It is the behavior. Then you look at the consequence. And if it takes away the headache, gee, the next time you get a headache, what are you going to do? You take an aspirin again. Okay, that behavior has been strengthened. Okay. All right, if a baby's crying, you don't know why, you try different things, you change his diaper, and that happens to make it stop crying, that's been negative reinforcement, because the behavior of changing the diaper results in the removal of the crying. You know, babies have this innate aversive cry, so that we'll do something about it, right? I have 6 kids. And even the simple behavior of putting on deodorant this morning, okay, results in the removal of or avoidance of an aversive body smell, okay, which means that chances are you're going to wear deodorant again the next day. Okay, that behavior of putting on deodorant has been reinforced by the removal or avoidance of body odor. Okay? And here's an example of negative reinforcement that I like to show in class. And I am online, so I'm going to try this. Okay.
How grateful I am.
I'm going to. I don't have the speakers plugged in, but you'll at least see, if not hear, those of you who are in the front, this example from The Simpsons. Okay. So how is that an example of negative reinforcement? Whining, the pestering, and as soon as he says, yes, I'll take you to Mount Splashmore, then they stop, okay? Which means that the next time they bug him, okay, if that worked, he's probably going to do it again, right? Now, for the children, what type of reinforcement was it? It was positive, okay? So we have this vicious cycle, right? You have positive reinforcement of the whining behavior for the children, and you have the negative reinforcement, okay, of, say, agreeing, you know, or giving in, and that means that the next time the situation arises, the same thing's probably going to happen again, okay? So unfortunately, both are being reinforced in those behaviors. All right. Yes?
Kind of going backwards a little bit. I was wondering if you had another example of positive punishment for smoking, because lung cancer is not a guarantee, and it's like way down the
Yeah.
road.
You'll smell bad.
Okay.
Coughing, yeah. Yellow teeth, yeah. There's a few others there. Okay, so these should be pretty easy, okay, because right now I'm only asking about reinforcement, okay, only reinforcement. Later we'll throw in punishment. Okay, so giving a dog a treat after it shakes hands, is that positive? Raise your hand if you think it's positive reinforcement. Okay, excellent, most of us, very good. Okay. Giving a child candy after he or she whines, is that positive or negative reinforcement? Raise your hand for positive. For the child, I'm sorry, for the child. Right? Right? For the child, okay, it's positive. All right, very good. How about washing off a corrosive chemical that's spilled on you? Okay, would that behavior be positive reinforcement, most likely, or negative? Be negative, right? Because the behavior of washing it removes whatever stinging or burning that the chemical is causing. Okay, so that's negative reinforcement, which means that the next time it spills on you, what are you going to do? You wash it off again. Okay, that behavior has been strengthened. Of course, whatever behavior led to you spilling it on your body in the first place, that's a different story. But remember, we're talking about the behavior and its immediate consequence. Okay. Stopping at a stoplight. Okay. Could that be positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement? Think about the consequences of that. Negative because it removes or prevents a ticket, an accident, injury. Okay, so, gee, I don't get a lot of positive reinforcement for stopping at the stoplight. Way to go, Jeff! I'm glad you stopped at the stoplight. Here's a piece of candy. But there's a lot of negative reinforcement that occurs. Okay, how about getting a kiss at the end of a date? Well, it depends, right? Is that reinforcement or punishment? I don't know, but yeah. Because it was added makes it positive, and that's all we're concerned about right now. Okay? All right, so that's to help hopefully straighten out, positive and negative reinforcement. But not only in the real world do we need to strengthen appropriate behaviors like putting up umbrellas and stopping at stoplights, but we also need to avoid those potentially harmful behaviors. How many of you ever got an electrical shock before? Okay. Yeah, okay, that's something you probably shouldn't be doing, and you're probably hopefully less likely to do it in the future. So the same pattern here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Other than positive punishment means immediately after the behavior, something was added, which in this case weakens the behavior. Okay. So once again, response, identify the behavior, its immediate consequence. If, as a consequence, something was added, it makes it positive. And if it weakens the behavior, it makes it punishment. So here's some examples of positive punishment. A spanking. Now this is why if you think positive is good, you're going to be confused. Because a spanking is positive punishment. Because after the behavior, I still remember this one as a kid, playing in the mud. My mom told me not to, but I still did with my brother. And we got a spanking afterwards. That is positive punishment. Okay? It made it less likely that I'd play in the mud, or at least get caught playing in the mud, right? Okay. I also want to emphasize that punishment doesn't always have to be between individuals. It can simply be the natural consequence of a behavior. So if you try a new deodorant and it gives you a rash in your armpit, you're going to be less likely to use it in the future. Okay? So the addition of the rash makes it positive as a consequence of putting on the deodorant, which means you'll be in the rash, make it less likely you'll wear it in the future. So sometimes it's just the natural consequence of the behavior. It doesn't have to be anybody else punishing somebody else. That's just the way it is. If you get a paper cut, okay, the way that you handle the paper, hopefully you'll be less likely to do that in the future. One time my kid got a lucky paper cut. I asked him, well, why was it lucky? He said, because it didn't hurt. Okay, you are lucky. Okay, you are lucky. All right, a speeding ticket, that's positive punishment. After you speed, you get the ticket.
My students contend that is negative punishment because it's not the ticket that's punishing, but it's the removal of money.
Well, that's a different consequence, and that is negative punishment. You're right. So that's why I don't like to use that example on the test. But it's like, well, what do you mean? Well, just to be clear about what you mean. Do you mean getting the ticket, or do you mean the fact that you have to pay money after that fine? So, and a simple positive, an unkind comment about wearing a pink shirt. I still remember this was I was a freshman in high school. David Chilcote comes up to me and says, Jeff, that's a girl shirt. Okay, I had pink stripes on my shirt, and so I never wore that shirt again. Okay. Very effective positive punishment, only took one time, but it's another example. Okay? Negative punishment, you take away something which weakens the behavior. Now, this is where I want to emphasize one other thing that often gets confusing about operant conditioning is, okay, let me first of all give some examples, okay, and then I'll tell you what it's not. Let's say that a child hits another child with a toy. Okay, and they go to timeout. That's kind of like the ultimate negative punishment, because what are you removing? Like everything, right? It's like, well, you can't play with the toys, you can't do anything. We used to send our kids to the laundry room. Okay, they could do laundry if they wanted, but I don't think they ever did. So, removal of all kinds of stuff, right? Likewise, if you break your curfew, you might be grounded, or you might have your video games taken away. Now, you'll hear things like this. Okay, you didn't take out the trash, so I'm going to take away your video game. Okay. Don't ever use those examples, okay? Because it conveys an inaccurate consequence. Well, it conveys an inaccurate conception of the behavior. Behavior is you're doing something that can be observed. Okay? We don't want to talk about things that we don't do, because the things that we're not doing during that time, we're actually doing something else. And that is the behavior that is getting the consequence. So let's say that instead of not taking out the trash, they were playing baseball in the backyard. Okay? So focus on the behaviors that are being performed, not on the behaviors that are not being performed. Okay? So only dead people can not do something, right? Okay? As long as we're alive, we're always doing something, and focus on those behaviors and the consequence. So strictly speaking, if you were playing baseball, instead of picking up your room or taking out the trash, okay, you are being punished for playing baseball, okay, by the removal of one of those stimuli. So it is negative punishment.
So, say for example, you happen to
Well, the great thing about humans is that we have language, okay? We talk a lot about rules and things that it'd be much more difficult to do. But if your dog played baseball and it didn't speak, English, and you punish it, it'd be thinking, well, I shouldn't play baseball again, okay? So humans, fortunately, in some ways, are a little more complex that can, we can work those things out. So once again, let me just emphasize, don't use examples of people not doing something, because strictly speaking, they were doing something else during that time, okay? So, only examples of punishment, is it positive or negative? I run into a pole while texting. It's positive, right? Because, following the behavior of texting, the addition of a pole, okay, or running into the pole, it's positive. Okay? Tasting a bitter chemical when you bite your nails. Okay, would that be positive or negative punishment? It's positive. Positive punishment because the addition of the nasty taste, okay, would be the positive part. Losing your driver's license after getting a DUI. That would be negative punishment. Okay, very good. Getting a black eye while playing baseball after misjudging a line drive. It'd be positive punishment. Okay, you'd be less likely to think of it in the future like that. That ended my baseball career actually when I was in, I think, 7th grade. I got a nice scar over my eyebrow where it split my eyebrow open. But anyway, eating an entire batch of chocolate cookies in one sitting and feeling sick to your stomach. Is that positive or negative punishment? It's positive. Yeah, because of the cookies, right? No. Because of the addition, okay, of the sickness. It's not because of the cookies. It's because the addition of the sickness makes it positive. A teacher takes away a student's cell phone when it rings in class. Okay, negative. Very good. I like to use this chart to help give students something that they can apply to every single condition that I give them by asking themselves 2 questions. Okay? So the questions are in the black boxes, and the answers, there's 2 answers to each question in the blue boxes, and when you combine them, you have 4 possible choices. So the first question is, maybe really the first question should be identify the behavior and what the consequence is. Okay. Then ask yourself, as a consequence of the behavior, was something added or removed? If it was added, it's going to be positive all the way across. If it was removed, it's going to be negative all the way across. And then you ask if that consequence strengthens the behavior, in which case it's reinforcement all the way down, or if it weakens the behavior, in which case it's punishment all the way down. And you get 4 possible choices, which if they correctly answer those 2 questions, they'll get every example correct. Then we put it all together. Okay? We put reinforcement and punishment together in the same examples, okay, as choices. By the way, I'm expecting that I'll share this PowerPoint presentation with Emily, and then you can distribute that as needed to participants. So,
I think this is in the top unit.
Oh yeah, I think I put it in there. So. Okay. It should be in there. That's right. All right. The police stop drivers and give awards for safe driving. Wouldn't that be? Okay, so talk about it with your partner, and we're talking about your driving behavior. Okay. All right. So for drivers, what type of consequence is that? Okay. It's the correct answer. It's positive reinforcement. Okay. Very good. They're going to get harder. Okay? A coach removes a player from the game for committing a flagrant foul. Okay? Guy goes up for layup, he hacks him, you're sitting on the bench. Okay? For the player, what type of consequence is that? All right, so the correct answer for this? Negative punishment.
Can I
Okay?
ask a question?
Yes.
Here's what my students will often do, because we were just talking about this. They will say, couldn't that be reinforcement of some kind, because you're increasing the child's behavior of not fouling?
Then I would say, we don't talk about not behaviors in this class. Okay?
Not behaviors.
Yeah, we don't talk about unbehaviors or,
Well,
yeah.
I would say, though, it increases the chances that they will play fairly.
Well, okay, then, okay, if you talk about that behavior, okay, that's a different behavior.
Fair play.
And, okay, If they play fair and it prevents them from sitting on the bench, then what is that? That's negative reinforcement.
Exactly what
They're
Okay.
it
avoiding.
said. If I
So-
turn this around,
yes.
and then I'll say, well, that's good that you see that.
Yes. Exactly, okay? So focus on the behavior that's in the question, not subsequent behavior, which may be changed by its own consequences, okay? We're talking about the behavior of committing the foul, okay? Excellent point, yes.
I think it's, to me, sometimes helpful, almost like diagramming a sentence. Have them go first find the behavior, and then what's the consequence? And then you don't have to interpret, well, what if this happened?
Yeah,
Well, look
yeah,
at the
yeah.
behaviors presented.
Right.
It's the coach, we're looking at the coach's behavior. The coach removes the player for doing something. So it's the coach's removing, because the player's done this, the coach removes them. That's the
Exactly.
consequence of the behavior.
Yes, exactly.
And honestly, to take away arguing on a test, I underline the behavior. Like, so in all of our practice problems, the behavior is underlined.
Yeah.
So that when they want to argue, because they're interpreting it differently, they know, they're like, we're looking at this underlined behavior, what's the consequence? It just has
Very
helped
good.
us over the years sort of avoid a lot of that reading into
Yeah.
the debate questions and the debate, especially on tests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
For those who couldn't hear, she said just underline the behavior in the question, okay? Or when they're contending it,
Yeah.
underline the behavior.
No, yeah.
All right, for the baseball player who makes an error, okay, their teammate glares at him or her, okay, what type of consequence is that?
Positive punishment.
Okay, it's positive punishment, very good, okay, they commit the error, they get the nasty look, hopefully they'll do it less in the future, okay. A suspected criminal confesses to a crime which ends the interrogation. Oh, you guys are good, but students on this one, they always get stuck. They start thinking about, well, let's see, was the interrogation added? Yeah, I mean, boy, they just start reading all kinds of stuff into this question. But focus on the behavior, okay, the confessing to the crime, and its immediate consequence is the removal of the interrogation, which means the next time he's interrogated, what's he going to do? Confess. Okay, that behavior has been strengthened, so it is negative reinforcement. You clean your room and your mom stops nagging you.
Negative reinforcement. Well, yeah, negative reinforcement.
It's negative reinforcement. Good. Okay, but students are like, oh, but you're adding the nagging. Okay, no. Okay, that's the mom's behavior. Okay, we're talking about the child who cleans the room and it ends the nagging. All right, your older brother sits on you until you say he is the king of the world. Okay, after you say it, he gets off. Negative reinforcement. And the reason I have several of these examples is because that's the one that I think is most confusing to students, negative reinforcement. Okay? They tend to confuse it with punishment, which has a completely opposite effect on the behavior. A rat receives the electric shock to its brain every time it presses a lever. The rat presses the lever more frequently. Positive reinforcement. Okay? And so here we have shock acting as a reinforcer, because it's delivered directly to the reward pathways in the brain. All right, a teenager is late for school and loses her cell phone for a day. She's less likely to be late in the future. Negative punishment. Okay, very good. When you buckle your seatbelt, the tone in your car shuts off. Okay, you're more likely to buckle next time.
Negative reinforcement.
Negative reinforcement. Good. Okay. So after raking the leaves in the yard, you receive a Justin Bieber CD. Okay, you rake the leaves less often. Positive punishment. Okay. JB, never say never, right? Okay. After completing your homework, you get your cell phone back. Positive reinforcement. Okay. All right. So why did I give you so many examples?
We need to do that for our students.
Because we and our students need a lot of practice on these, because they carry in these preconceptions that they just can't seem to drop, what positive and negative mean, and it will confuse them. So give them lots of opportunities. In fact, I've taken out a number of examples, and there may be a full class period where I just ask these questions over and over and over. And then when they come back to the next class period, I ask a few more, usually about negative reinforcement, okay? And it just takes that long for them to get it. So the take-home points for operant conditioning: identify the behavior and its consequence, okay? Will the consequence strengthen or weaken the behavior? Was something added or removed? It has nothing to do with good or bad. And remember, you can't do nothing, okay, unless you're dead. So always focus on the actual behaviors that are occurring. Okay? Let's not confuse students or ourselves. Okay? There's actually only one place in my whole Psych of Learning course which I talk about not reinforcing a behavior. Okay? It's differential reinforcement of zero responding. Okay? But otherwise, I say, that's the only time that I talk about reinforcing the absence of a behavior. Okay? But you can also think about it as reinforcing every other behavior except the one you're trying to get rid of. Okay? Which is why it's also sometimes called differential reinforcement of other behavior. All right. If I'd been keeping track electronically, we'd have some team scores at this point.